Breaking news! The tension inside the Miami Dolphins organization is boiling over, and what I've been hearing could change the way fans look at this team heading into the 2025 season. There are serious doubts about whether this roster is built to win now, and even bigger questions about whether Chris Grier should still be making these decisions, because let's be honest, Grier should have been fired already. But for some reason, he's still here, and his mistakes are starting to catch up with this team. There are whispers coming out of training camp about lineup changes, some players impressing way more than expected, and others who might not even deserve to start. The secondary, which everyone already knew was a problem, could be even worse than we imagined, and that could be the one thing that kills this team's Super Bowl hopes before the season even starts. But hold on, because there's also something really exciting brewing. There are players on this roster who could completely change the narrative if they step up. And if Mike McDaniel plays this the right way, the Dolphins might surprise a lot of people. I'll break it all down for you, but before we dive deep, make sure you hit that like button, only if you're a real Miami Dolphins fan who truly believes this team can turn things around. And if you've been cheering for the Dolphins for more than 20 years, drop a comment saying, "Go Dolphins!" My heart bleeds aqua and orange, because this is going to be a wild season, and you're going to want to be part of this conversation from the very beginning. Now, let me tell you exactly what's going on, because the truth about this roster might shock you. ESPN just disrespected the Miami Dolphins in a way that has fans furious, ranking this team 24th among all NFL rosters heading into training camp. 24th, behind the Raiders and the Patriots. That's absolutely ridiculous. This is the same Patriots team rebuilding with no elite offensive weapons and the same Raiders whose top wide receiver is Jacoby Myers and whose secondary is nothing special. Yet somehow, ESPN believes Miami is worse? It's insulting. If Tua Tagovailoa plays at least 15 games, there is no way this team finishes with a top 10 draft pick as that ranking suggests. Tua is 38-24 as a starter. He's not losing 10 games. It's disrespectful, plain and simple. But here's where things get interesting. The biggest strength of this roster, according to ESPN, is the wide receiver group, and they are right about that. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are still a top 5 duo in the league. Hill may have dropped to 959 yards and 6 touchdowns last season after battling injuries and constant too-high safety looks, but this is still one of the most dangerous receiving pairs in football. Adding Nick Westbrook-Ikine on a 2-year deal gives Miami something they haven't had in a while, a big-bodied receiver who can block in the run game and be a legitimate red zone threat. And don't sleep on Malik Washington, the second-year receiver out of Virginia. He could become a gadget weapon out of the slot, something this offense has been missing. Now, let's address the biggest problem, and it's a massive one, the secondary. Losing Jalen Ramsey, Javon Holland, and Kendall Fuller has left this defense dangerously thin in the backfield. The replacements? Artie Burns, Ashton Davis, and Ifeatu Melifonwu. Plus, 2 rookies in Jason Marshall Jr. and Dante Trader Jr., who are expected to learn on the fly. The projected starting corners are Storm Duck and Cam Smith, with Kader Kohou in the slot. Kohou is one of the best nickel corners in the league, but Duck and Smith on the outside for 17 games? That's a huge gamble. This is exactly why many fans wanted the Dolphins to draft a cornerback in the first 3 rounds, and now we're stuck with major question marks. If this defense collapses in 2025, the secondary will be the reason. The X factor this season will be the running game, which went from being the most efficient in 2023 to the second worst in 2024. Losing Robert Hunt hurt badly, but Miami addressed the offensive line by bringing in James Daniels and Jonas Savinia, which is a big upgrade. Patrick Paul will replace Terron Armstead, and while he's a young and proven starter, this offensive line should be better than last year. If that's true, Devin Achane, Jalen Wright, and Raheem Mostert have no excuse. All 3 had negative rushing yards over expectation last season, which cannot happen again if Miami wants to compete deep into the playoffs. On defense, one area of hope is the front 7. With Bradley Chubb, Jaylon Phillips, and Chop Robinson on the edges, plus the addition of Kenneth Grant inside, this group could finally become more physical and dominate at the line of scrimmage. ESPN even highlighted the linebacker depth as one of Miami's hidden strengths. KJ Britt and Willie Gay Jr., both signed in free agency, provide insurance if starters Jordan Brooks or Tyrell Dodson go down. For once, the Dolphins have depth at linebacker, which is rare for this team. And that's why the ESPN ranking feels so wrong. This team isn't perfect, far from it, but 24th? No way. Even with questions in the secondary, this roster is better than that. And if Tua stays healthy, this team should absolutely be fighting for a playoff spot. But here's the question that's dividing fans. Do you really believe this secondary is good enough to hold up against top AFC quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Joe Burrow? Or is this the Achilles heel that could destroy Miami's playoff hopes before they even begin? And here's where things get really heated because the optimism around the offense doesn't erase the reality that the secondary could be a disaster waiting to happen. Think about it. Storm Duck and Cam Smith as your starting boundary corners for a full 17-game season? That's asking for trouble, especially when you're going up against elite AFC quarterbacks every single week. Kader Kohou is fantastic in the slot, a top 10 nickel corner in the league, no debate there. But outside, it's a gamble that could cost Miami games. The Dolphins added Minkah Fitzpatrick, which was a huge move and probably the only real reason for hope in the secondary. If he can return to his all-pro form and Ashton Davis takes a big step forward, that might be enough to patch things up. But let's be honest, hoping for a maybe in a league this competitive isn't a winning strategy. This is the kind of mistake that falls directly on Chris Grier. He had the chance to draft a top-tier corner early, but instead, we're heading into the season relying on improving guys. Once again, Grier's roster-building decisions are a risk that could derail the season before it even starts. Now, let's switch to something more positive because there is reason to believe Miami can surprise people if the offensive line finally lives up to its potential. Losing Robert Hunt was a huge blow, no question. But James Daniels and Jonah Savinia might be the exact upgrades this team needed. Daniels, when healthy, is one of the most reliable interior linemen in football, and Savinia brings physicality this unit desperately lacked last season. Patrick Paul replacing Terron Armstead is a concern because he's a first-time full-year starter, but this line overall is stronger than last year's group. If they can stay healthy, the running game could explode again, and that's where Miami can truly separate itself. Mike McDaniel's system works best when the run sets up the pass, and that wasn't happening last season. Devin Achane, Jalen Wright, and Raheem Mostert have to step up, and ESPN labeled this running game as the X factor for a reason. If this offense returns to being a top 10 unit, the Dolphins are going to shock people. And speaking of shocking people, let's not overlook the front seven. The depth here might be the best we've seen in years. Bradley Chubb and Jaylon Phillips are finally healthy, and Chop Robinson is coming off a breakout rookie season. Add Kenneth Grant into the mix, and suddenly this defensive line looks nasty. The linebacker duo of Tyrell Dodson and Jordan Brooks is one of the most underrated in the NFL, and the fact that Miami added depth with KJ Britt and Willie Gay Jr. means this defense can handle injuries better than before. If this unit can dominate the line of scrimmage, stop the run, and pressure quarterbacks consistently, it's going to take a lot of pressure off that shaky secondary. But here's the million-dollar question. Can this all come together at the right time? Tua Tagovailoa is still the key to everything. If he stays healthy, this team is absolutely capable of making the playoffs. But if he goes down or the secondary collapses, this season could spiral out of control fast. That's why ESPN's 24th ranking feels so wrong to me. Miami has too much talent on offense and in the front seven to be ranked that low. And let me add this because it's something that a lot of people aren't talking about enough. Mike McDaniel is under pressure this season more than ever before. The excuses are running out. Yes, injuries derailed last season, but great coaches find ways to adjust, and now he's got to prove he can win when things aren't perfect. He has Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and one of the most dynamic offensive rosters in the league. If this offense isn't top 10 again, questions are going to start being asked about his play calling and his ability to make adjustments when defenses take away the deep ball. Teams know how to defend Miami now. They sit in those two high safety looks, force Tua to play underneath, and rely on the Dolphins' inability to run the football consistently. That has to change in 2025, and it starts with McDaniel finding balance. The defense, on the other hand, has to play with more aggression. If this front seven is as good as advertised, they need to set the tone every single game. That means putting quarterbacks under pressure, forcing turnovers, and making up for the lack of proven talent in the secondary. And let's be real, this team can't afford slow starts. The schedule early in the season is favorable, and Miami has to jump out fast if they want a playoff shot. If they stumble out of the gate, things could spiral quickly, especially in a loaded AFC. So here's my final question for you, Dolphins fans. Do you still trust Mike McDaniel to be the guy who leads this team to the Super Bowl? Or is this the make or break year where we find out if he's really the right coach for the job? Drop your answer in the comments because this conversation is just getting started.